Welcome to Prototech's Mastercam 2024 Rollout video series. In this video, we'll take a look at enhancements to Mastercam 2024 for the mill product. The first thing we're going to take a look at is that there's a completely new toolpath in Mastercam 2024 called Process Hole. For starters, this is not found in your 2D mill category by the other hole making toolpaths. It's up in the top of the ribbon bar next to the toolpath transform. It is also using the new panel interface for the toolpaths. We've seen some toolpaths done in this interface, specifically in the lathe product, the B-axis turning and the custom threading toolpaths that were introduced in previous versions of Mastercam. Process hole is not automatic. You need to create toolpaths in a file first, and then you can use process hole to apply them in future jobs. So it has a few requirements. It needs to be a solid model, and you need to select the walls of the holes, and the holes need to be hole features in the solid tree. So that means that if you made the part in Mastercam, in the solids menu, you'd need to use the hole function or hole wizard to create the holes. Or if you import the file from another modeling software, they will come in as simple solids where there's only a block and no features. But in the model prep tab of Mastercam, you can choose to find holes, and it'll find them and add them as hole features. And now you can use this process. So it needs to be a hole feature in a solid model in Mastercam. And you need to have toolpathed that same type of feature already. So for instance, create a template file like what's shown on the screen here now, and you could, create processes on this. Your template file is broken up into different toolpath groups, and whatever you name the toolpath group, that's how it'll appear when you run process holes. So each type of feature you'd make would have a different toolpath group with a name on it, the toolpath group name, and then you pick that file and it would find matches and show those. So here in Mastercam, it is over right underneath the toolpath ribbon bar here, process hole. Before I do this, the holes have already been found. I mentioned in my model, this was not modeled in Mastercam, but in my model prep, I ran the find hole function. It's a pretty straightforward function. You get min, max sizes, a couple options. That's already been processed. So if I look at my solid here, this solid already has hole features on it. Just a quick note, the hole feature has been enhanced for Mastercam 2024 as well. I've always had top edge treatments of chamfers, but I have top edge treatments of either chamfers or radiuses, fillets. And I now also have bottom edge treatments with both chamfers or fillets. So I'm going to generate a process hole. I'll pick these holes here. There's where I have my hole count there now as well. And then I can move down to the next step here. And this is where you already have to have something programmed. So I have that template file. Now it defaults to going to the mill ops folder, and that's where I suggest putting these process hole libraries. That's where your import export ops and your toolpath defaults reside. It'll make transitioning between versions of the migration easier if you don't put these in a custom location. So I have this op library file here where I already have these holes, this size of hole toolpathed. If I have more than one process for that hole, I can flip between processes. This particular hole, I only programmed one simple process for it, and it kind of gives me a preview here, basically spot drilling and peck drilling. I can do a minimum height. I can go to an absolute or incremental clearance plane, green check. And even if there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 toolpaths to do that, I just create one toolpath here. It kind of is like the transform toolpath where the one thing contains many. If I backplot this one toolpath that does the spot drill and the drill, and if I edit it, it's still got that process hole. This is where if I had multiple types, it'd be easy to change. Here I could go to a minimum height and look at that instead. Doesn't go all the way up now between the holes. This one toolpath does it all. There is kind of a cool sort function here too. If you're doing rotary work and maybe the rotations are slower than the tool changes, maybe you want to, instead, what I did there is I spot, drill, drill, drill. Maybe I want to spot drill index. I can also change the sorting by hole. Since one toolpath does this all, I could easily just flip that and then it would spot and then drill, spot and then drill. If you wanted to do something like that in the past, it would take quite a bit of work. You'd have to make each one of those toolpaths basically individual toolpaths. Now I can just flip a switch and change that order around. As I mentioned, there's also a right-click function for this. When I right-click on that operation, I have a new selection here. I can explode process hole, and then that gets rid of the process hole. It's no longer a process hole. It makes it into its independent, just regular, drill tool pass, whatever's involved based on my settings there. And now I can no longer edit as a process hole. But the process hole is pretty quick to build. So if I did want to make some bigger changes again, I could delete these and rerun process hole. Also for process hole, it also works with multi-axis drilling. So let's drill a few holes. I'll run process hole again. I'm just going to pick a couple of these holes this time. A few tilts there. It remembered the file I had pulled from last time. This one I have just a plain 250 simple drill, or I have a variation on it where it's a 1/4 20 tap, where it's spot drill drills taps. And then similar to multi-axis drilling, I also have access to safety zone. So I could define a safety zone. For my safety zones in these types of scenarios, I like using a wrap, and then I have an offset distance. So it's kind of like a tight saran wrap around the part, but then I have it expanded out a 1/2 inch here. So there's some 5-axis drilling. Once again, that one operation does the spot drill drill, and I have my interface here. I could quickly switch this to a tap. Now it's spot drills, and taps. So that's a whole new toolpath for Mastercam 2024 process hole. If you got a lot of hole making to do, this is kind of like feature-based drilling. It automates it, except for feature-based drilling, you're kind of locked into some kind of predefined functions. Here, you do have to toolpath it once yourself, but that gives you control over, being able to do this exactly how you want. Maybe you have a special process, maybe there's a spot drill, plunge and end mill, tap, then countersink, or it allows for customization, but it does require some setup. We also have some new interface with the save and the load toolpath defaults. If you're not using toolpath defaults, I really feel like there's some room for improvement there. I feel like toolpath defaults are a huge part of becoming more consistent in your programming and becoming faster. You can basically remove redundant clicks. In training, I always kind of push this and say, even if you only set that half the time, at least if you save it as defaults, it's half the time, you don't have to change it. Well, they've made this better. I basically got one set of defaults before. I could load different default files, so I could have different defaults for different machines, or maybe different defaults that I could pick in my setup or on the fly for different type of setup scenarios. Maybe I had defaults for vice work and I had defaults for clamp work, or defaults for one machine or another. But I only had like one set of defaults active. Now at my fingertips, I can have multiple defaults. So for instance, when I hit load defaults, if I have multiple defaults in there, I now can get a drop-down list and I can have different scenarios already pre-built. This greatly enhances the default function, and it's more to set up, but now I don't have to say anymore, well, it's only 50% of the time, well, maybe 20% of the time you do this, and 5% of the time you do this, and you do it enough where it's worth saving away. You can have all those different scenarios saved away now, and at a quick couple of clicks, set up all the different options that are important for that type of scenario in your toolpaths. It also adds a new panel interface for kind of dealing with, are you just using the defaults the way you did in the older versions, or are you using these new custom ones? So this is really neat. Let's take a look at this in Mastercam. I already love using the defaults and push them really hard. I think they're a huge important part of Mastercam, and this just makes them better. So for instance, I had these, I did the expand or explode process hole here. So I have a drill path, some drilling paths. So if I go in there and maybe I want to make a change to my defaults. So here's my save to defaults and here's my load to defaults. Let's start with saving a default first, see what that looks like. So maybe I want to set a default where I'm doing a rigid tapping. Now the defaults are controlling multiple pages, but I'm just going to focus in on this one setting. So maybe I want to save that as my default. So if I hit save as default, that used to just be done. That was it. It would be saved to whatever default file was set in the file. All of the posts, just it's a post setting which default is used, and all posts just use mill-inch defaults. You can edit the post to have different defaults, and you could edit the defaults. You have access to it on the machine page in your machine group setup where you switch your post. There's library files you can edit. So it was kind of behind the scenes. You can see it just hit and it's done. Now you can kind of see where it's going. Default just goes back to that file. Custom, it actually, instead of going into the defaults, it goes into the operations. So you could have different operations files here. You could load a different one. And if you want to go to custom, now I can hit the add button and add a new custom default. And this is what will show up in the drop-down menu. And maybe I want to add one that I have set up for rigid tapping. So then that saved it into rigid tapping. So now when I want to load defaults, I used to just hit the load button and it'll just reset it back to defaults. Now I can hit the drop down and I can pick the top one, and that is similar or mimics the behavior seen in earlier versions, whatever my default setting is. Or here's where when I do custom ones, I can add the custom ones and I can choose the custom ones. So for instance, I got a peck drilling here and that's got peck drilling set up, or I have my one I just made, the rigid tapping. That's got my settings for the rigid tapping. So this, we kind of had a limitation before, and I did still suggest to people that, even if it's only, 30% of the time, 50% of the time, that's 50% of the time you don't have to make these adjustments. Well, now we can even go beyond that, and I can, if I have common variations, I can set them up too and have them readily available with just a few clicks. It's pretty neat stuff. I want to take a look at that in one other scenario as well. I'm just going to make a new OptiRough. So my OptiRough, I just have one machining and one avoidance, or maybe I have a electrode scenario where I want different stock to leaves on different features. So maybe I want additional, machining geometries here. I could have all that set up too. This file doesn't have it, so I'm going to hit the save button so I can actually load in another file that I have some default set for. Here you can see I have some different OptiRoughs already in this one once it loads here. There we go. And so now I could have different, scenarios here where once again, you can have settings across different pages, but I'm just looking at this machine geometry page here. I could have multiple stock values here where maybe I have some, have 0 on some and 5 on others, 10 on others. It can already be all pre-built and pre-color coded and the stock numbers in. And this just really opens up the possibility of, really being able to fine tune your stuff and have a lot of settings at a quick, just right at your fingertips. Really neat stuff. We also see some enhancements to dynamic milling in Mastercam 2024. Dynamic milling and OptiRough are probably some of our flagship roughing toolpaths. It's kind of my go-to for roughing. We see enhancement to it in 2024. Here's kind of a before and after using this new enhancement. I'm going to come back to this slide, but what we have is just a simple checkbox, maximize engagement. Let's take a look at this in Mastercam, see what this does. So in previous version of Mastercam, when you do dynamic toolpaths, it basically slowly engages into the material. It takes a while to get into the full step over. So if I backplot this one, turn off my holder here. It takes a while. Try my quick verify. If I tilt this a little bit, I can see that edge. It takes a little while. I'm not really to full engagement, whatever, I'm at 20% step over, until somewhere over here before I get full engagement. It slowly engages in the material. So the first thing that this maximize engagement does, so here on the cut parameters page, this one has the maximize engagement on. So if I backplot this one, it gets into my full step over pretty much immediately. So I look at these both at the same time. Here is one path. It's taken a while there. I'm into material right away. I can see if I'm looking for them first passes kind of merged. So right about over here, I didn't get into full engagement on the first pass. Without maximize engagement on, it takes me a while to get into full engagement. I'm immediately getting into full engagement. I am thinking that I would probably usually have this on. Maybe if you have a small tool and you can't, you don't want to engage too fast, maybe you wouldn't have it on. But I would think a majority of the time this would probably be on. You're going to see benefits from having this on. It does another thing as well. I'm going to go into backplot again. This is with maximize engagement off. So this would be like in 2023 and older. Sometimes my cuts could leave small slivers of material here. So when I come back around to finish this, what Dynamic has always done is it just barely steps over enough to get rid of that. And depending on the material you're cutting, I'm kind of on there in the cutter. I'm on the very edge of the cutter. Plastics or something that could maybe bust out, chunk out, and wreck it. Or there were some problems when using facing as well. If you're facing, sometimes if your tool wasn't exactly on size, it'd leave little cusps. It wouldn't get everything. So that has changed with this maximize engagement as well. So if I look at it with the maximize engagement, it still is leaving a thin wall there. It's got this exact same toolpath just with maximize engagement on, so the same step over and everything. But now when it comes back and cuts this, look at where it's cutting in the cutter. It's more kind of in the middle of the half of the tool. It's cutting here in the cutter, and before it was cutting over here. So there's more overlap, and that's maybe more a desirable place to cut on the cutter for something like that, depending on what material you're cutting. Once again, that's just a simple checkbox. You just check that on, and it performs those new functions. And then just a quick side-by-side glance at it again. It's just with it off and with it on. We also see some enhancements to area mill in Mastercam 2024. I probably tend to use dynamic roughing versus area mill roughing. Area mill is kind of a parallel spiral, similar to pocket parallel spiral toolpath, but I do like area mill for finishing floors. If I need to finish a floor, area mill is great for that. It's much better at pocket, especially for outside in type shapes. Pocket is, I still like pocket for finishing floors and walls, but for finishing a floor, area mill is often my go-to. And this enhancement to 2024 makes area mill even better for finishing floors. This is not like a completely new interface. We've seen this in other toolpaths. Think like Waterline in the 3D. I can do one way or zigzag. That's what's new in area mill. Area mill only had basically one way before. It was just climb or conventional. That was it. Now I have a one way or zigzag for open contours. So what that does for me, for instance, this part here, if I were to area mill those flats in 23 and older, I'd get one way, so I have a lot of retracts coming all the way back across here on these open contours. And in 2024, I can turn on a zigzag and get a much cleaner facing path with way fewer retracts. I'm talking about finishing the face here, so we're probably cutting maybe 5-10 thou. So I mean, I am conventional milling now in some passes, but for removing that little bit of material for facing, I think that this is a neat enhancement. I see myself using this a lot. There are also some new chaining functions. This is another one of those in the previous video I kind of mentioned in the interface rollout video, but sometimes just kind of those little quality of life enhancements are my favorites. This one, when I see it, it just makes sense. I feel like it should have just always been there. If I go to another version, I'll probably miss it. This is a great enhancement to 2024. We can now edit our chains just by double clicking on the arrows. So we've had this functionality. So this is saying maybe I forgot to use my show all chains. I didn't double check if they're all right. and now I need to go back and edit my chains. I used to have to do that through right-click menu. I could say right-click, reverse, right-click, change side, stuff like that. I can do the exact same thing now. I can just do it by double-clicking out on the chains. Let's take a look at that. So here I have a tool path, and I can see that this pocket is being cut on the wrong side. It's the cuts down in the part there. I messed up the chain. I didn't catch it when I was building it. So now I go into my geometry, and in the past I've always had to find the chain, and then once I find it, I could double click on it and reverse it. If I had multiple chains, I only had to reverse it. If I have a single chain, reversing it would also change the side, so I'd have to also right click, change the side. I'll show you that all still behaves the same. It's just a different way of doing it. And I have a new way of finding the chain too. I could hit this arrow and pick the chain before, but now I can just click on one of these arrows and it finds the chain in the list for me. So that's new too. I can just click on an arrow. It lights up that chain in the list. And then the other new thing I was talking about, like right here, this is the bad chain. I want to change the direction of it. So that's the long arrow. If I just double click on the long arrow, it changes the direction. There, I'm done. It's fixed. And here I just have the other example. This one is wrong, but it's a single chain. And it would be the same thing if I used the right clicks. I'd have to reverse it. So double click the long arrow, but then it changes the comp direction, comp left, comp right. So I'd have to right click again and say change side, but I can also double click on the short arrow. So I can just double click on the arrows now. It just makes sense. The arrows are there. It's nice and easy right on the screen. You don't have to, it's not hidden in a right click. It's not, you don't have to find the chain. It's just right off the screen. This is a great enhancement to 24. And that concludes Prototech's Mastercam 2024 enhancements to the mill product. Be sure to check out our other rollout videos. Thanks for watching.